This has been a very interesting, and you could definitely argue a bit of a disappointing offseason so far from the New York Rangers. They have not gone out there and made a bunch of big moves to really try and upgrade this roster, but they could end up doing that at the NHL trade deadline, or there still is a lot of time in this offseason there where they could still make some moves happen. So we'll have to wait and see, but those big moves would definitely have to come via trade because there's not really any top 4 caliber defensemen or top 6 caliber forwards left in free agency, so a trade would more than likely have to happen there if the Rangers were to acquire a true, very impactful player at some point throughout this offseason. In today's video, I figured we'd take a look at some of the additions and subtractions from this New York Rangers roster, the NHL roster, so far this season. I'm not counting a guy like, Chad Ruhwedel there, who was acquired at the NHL trade deadline by the Rangers from the Penguins. They ended up getting re-signed there. Not counting a guy like that. It's not really an addition there. It's kind of just a guy who came back. So not counting him. We're going to take a look at the true additions and subtractions from this Rangers roster so far this offseason. So starting off here, let's talk about the subtractions so far from this Rangers roster. The first guy we have here to talk about is Barclay Goodrow. He ends up getting waived there by the Rangers, and it ends up being a pretty good move as the San Jose Sharks end up claiming him off waivers, so he goes over to the Sharks there for absolutely nothing. And that's the big thing there as well, as Rangers did not have to give up any prospects or picks, or any players off this roster to get off that contract there, which did have multiple years left with a $3.64 million cap hit. This was a great move there by the Rangers. Get off him for absolutely nothing. And it also does open up a spot somewhere on this roster for possibly a young player to make more of an impact, potentially in that bottom 6, which would not be a bad idea at all. You have a guy like Adam Edstrom there, Matt Rampig, get more time on that fourth line now possibly with moving off from a guy like Barclay Goodrow. So I do like that move, and it's not like Barclay has been a phenomenal player for this Rangers team. Yes, he did have a good playoff run with this squad, but this is really the only kind of first playoff run that actually was, very impactful offensively. Before, he was a solid kind of two-way guy, but really made a big impact offensively this playoff run, yes. But other than that, he has not been a great player and has definitely not been worth $3.6 million. He's had some good, impact at moments, but for the most part there is definitely not worth that contract. I think this is a more than good move for the New York Rangers to get off that contract, save some money cap space-wise, and also open up a roster spot. And next up here, we have Jack Roslovic, who ended up getting traded for by the Rangers at this past NHL trade deadline for a 4th-round pick that was conditional on possibly, if the Rangers made the Cup final there, it would have became a 3rd-rounder. Obviously, that did not happen, unfortunately. So, ends up being a 4th-round pick in 2026 from the Rangers to the Blue Jackets for Jack Roslovic, who ended up being a decent, solid kind of winger for the Rangers here. He wasn't a real kind of impactful player. Yes, he put out some decent kind of point totals there if you just look at the stats, but I think his overall play was nothing too special there. He was about half a point per game in the playoffs and just under that throughout this regular season there with the Rangers. But I think his actual impact on this team was not really great at all. He made a lot of kind of poor plays, poor decisions, a lot of giveaways for the most part there, some kind of bad ones as well. Didn't make a real kind of overall good impact on this Rangers team. He has put up the point totals there, but I think in general it's more of just kind of a passenger on that line beside guys like, Kreider and Zibanejad for the most part, had a bit of time down lower in the line. So I think overall, this was not a great move there by the Rangers. It was an okay one, adding some solid depth there, be an okay player, but did not quite work out as well as some people kind of thought he could possibly do with the Rangers. Next up here, we have Alex Wennberg, who was also acquired at this past NHL trade deadline. Ended up being an okay trade there. Not a great value one, honestly, for what the impact they actually kind of had there. Ended up being a 2nd-round pick and a 4th, which is, not great value for what he brought, honestly. I thought he could do a bit better than what he actually did for this team. Throughout the playoffs there, offensively, he did pretty much nothing there. Only had 2 points. He was very limited offensively. Didn't even play the best defensively. Throughout the regular season there with the Rangers, only had 5 points, 19 games. Again, the offensive impact was just not there at all, unfortunately. Yes, he was in a 3rd line, kind of more defensive role, but still, you need some kind of offensive impact there, and he just did not have that at all there with the Rangers, which was quite disappointing. Defensively, still was not the best, like I said. So really not a great overall trade there by the Rangers. Definitely not one of their better moves, but it made sense why they made it there, because Chytil was kind of questionable there for a bit, especially the deadline there. We did not know whether he was going to or not, actually make an impact during the playoffs. So in hindsight, maybe you don't like to do that move, but either way, they needed kind of a 3rd line center there to kind of shore up that spot, and it just did not work out the best for the Rangers, unfortunately. And now we have Blake Wheeler, who had a kind of unfortunate, you could say an unlucky season with the Rangers there. Ended up having throughout the regular season there, 54 games played, 21 points. Made a pretty solid impact there. Didn't play too bad, but didn't have much of an impact in the playoffs as he ended up sustaining a pretty serious, nearly season-ending injury throughout the kind of second half of the Rangers season. Played 54 games in the regular season there, 21 points, not too bad, but only got to play one game in the playoffs, played 9 minutes and 18 seconds. Had a bit of an impact there, but obviously coming off that injury, couldn't do a whole lot other than that one game played he had. Kind of unfortunate there. Would have been a nice guy to have for the playoffs. There would have been a solid kind of, at least either depth guy or a solid guy possibly alongside Kreider and Zibanejad, but it's unfortunate he gets the injury, cannot have much of an impact in the playoffs there. Jack Roslovic kind of came in and took his spot, which it is what it is. Jack played okay, but like I said, Blake Wheeler would have been a nice guy to have throughout that playoff run. But an unfortunate kind of ending there, but he still played pretty solid. Signed a one-year deal on a very cheap contract. Not a bad signing at all. Obviously made a solid impact. Definitely did not do as good as I kind of thought he could, especially with the injury he sustained, but not bad move at all by Chris Drury. And the last subtraction we have to talk about in today's video is Erik Gustafsson. I think this is going to be a fine move here. I'm not too worried about this at all. We have a guy like Zach Jones who can take his spot and do as good possibly, if not a bit better potentially, which I think is definitely a very possible scenario. Zach Jones is kind of a younger version of Erik, honestly, and you could say at some aspects he's a bit better than him, so I don't think it's going to be too big of a miss at all. He did play solid for this team, ended up putting up some pretty good point totals throughout this regular season, having 31 points for a defenseman in 76 games played is not bad at all. Throughout the playoffs, though, didn't have the biggest impact offensively, had 16 games played, 3 points, all assists there. It's nothing too crazy, but I still think had a pretty good time with the Rangers, ended up doing solid this past season, but nothing too crazy. And the first addition we have here is Riley Smith, who the Rangers traded for from the Pittsburgh Penguins this offseason not too long ago. He ended up having 76 games played, 13 goals, 27 assists, 40 points. Obviously nothing in the playoffs there because the Pens did not make the playoffs, but he ended up getting traded for a second and a fifth-round pick. I think overall, not too bad there. The Pens retained 50% on that trade as well, so they helped us out a bit. But in general, I think this was a solid trade here for the Rangers. I know some Rangers fans didn't love this move here, but this is a guy who can make a solid impact in the top six there on the second line, possibly alongside guys like Kreider and Zibanejad, or on that third line in a depth scoring role, depending on what they want to do with a guy like Brendan Othman there. Does Othman kind of get that spot on the second line alongside Kreider and Zibanejad, or possibly somewhere on the third line? We'll have to wait and see, but if they want to have a guy like Othman or Riley Smith there on that second or third line, I would not be against it at all. I think Smith is going to be a solid, impactful, veteran guy who has done a pretty good job of being a great point producer in the playoffs as well, so we'll have to wait and see, but in general, should be a very solid, impactful player for this team. And now we have pretty much the Barclay-Gaudreau replacement, and that is Sam Carrick, who will be that fourth-line center for this New York Rangers team. I like this move a lot. Obviously, it's not some, game-breaking, crazy top six forward here who's going to really, score a ton of points here and be some very impactful guy, but he's going to be a very solid, good fourth-line center. But he's going to be a fourth-line center, play a good two-way game. He can help on the PK a bit there. He is a very good face-off taker, which is nice. He plays very physical, blocks some shots. He's just going to be a solid, more defensive kind of forward there, play a very physical, tough game, be that kind of gritty guy out there on the ice. This past season ended up having 77 games played between the Anaheim Ducks and the Edmonton Oilers we got traded to at the deadline. Had 10 goals there, 6 assists, 16 points. You're not going to put up a crazy amount of points there, but be a solid fourth-line center. He's 6 foot, all right size. In the playoffs with the Edmonton Oilers, had 10 games played, 1 assist there, 1 point. Not too bad. Played a nice fourth-line role for them, and it's going to be probably doing the same thing for the Rangers here and be a very impactful guy on that fourth line. And he also signed a fairly reasonable 3-year deal with a $1 million cap hit per season, which is not too bad at all. It's not like he's some super old guy either. He's only 32, so he'll be in his mid-30s by that time this contract's up. I think it's a fine contract, maybe a year or two long, but not too bad. And you're saving $2.64 million compared to the Barclay-Gaudreau deal. I think it's going to make a solid impact on the fourth line there, and it's a pretty solid move by Chris Drury. Anyways, though, let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on these additions and subtractions. What position you still think we need to address there? Obviously, a top 6 forward would be ideal there. I don't think we're going to make too much kind of moves on the back end there on the defensive side of things. There maybe we see, one more defenseman added in. Here's a left-handed guy, but other than that, I think we're pretty set defensively. Ryan Linger's going to get re-signed there. He's out in arbitration right now, so we'll see what happens there with his next contract. I'll definitely have a video coming on that later on, but for right now, I think maybe a forward 2 get added in possibly, but for right now, we could very well see a lot of the kind of young guys like Brendan Hoffman, Brett Berard, Adam Edstrom, Matt Ren, they make a true impact on this Rangers team this upcoming season. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next one, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video for daily New York Rangers content as I do post every single day. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next one. See ya.